The idea of power is rooted in everything. The driving force behind practically every conflict is, in some way, power. This idea becomes even more prevalent when you start looking at stories that incorporate some kind of fantastical aspect into themselves. Creating powerful characters can be extremely fun and interesting to explore, but what do you do when you create a character that's too powerful? To get to the root of why having a character who's too powerful is a problem, I have to first ask you, what makes a story? And the answer would have to be, it's the stakes. In order to achieve a narrative, or in order to have compelling characters with strong and believable character development, you must first have stakes. It's the idea of characters trying to achieve something, whether that be trying to reach a place, a point, or even just the idea of characters winning or losing that drives the plot. Now, when you start to add the concept of power and giving your characters head power, it tends to point the plot in some kind of power seeking direction. Take Dragon Ball, for example. In Dragon Ball's infancy, it was very much a story that was driven on getting stronger and gaining power, but in a much more different way than modern Dragon Ball is depicted to be today. If you were someone who only watched Dragon Ball Super Z, then going back and watching the original series would lead you to find that it's quite a bit more explorative than you would expect. Bringing this conversation back down to stakes, the main show, the original Dragon Ball, is very much based on the stakes of finding the Dragon Balls themselves, and thus our characters are driven to travel to places they've never been before and learn things that they didn't know. Even down to the fight scenes in the original Dragon Ball series, it's not so much a conflict of who's stronger, but more of a conflict of technique. The idea of being powerful, but not so powerful that your characters still have to learn and try to find a smart way around a situation, is part of what makes the original Dragon Ball series so great, but unfortunately all of this changes as soon as Dragon Ball Z introduces power levels. Now, while I love big explosive fights and giant earth-defying displays of power as much as the next guy, it's very hard to say that this was the right call for the Dragon Ball franchise. While the beginning of Dragon Ball Z does still follow along the path of not being so powerful that you have to find a way to outsmart your enemy, the moment Goku discovers Super Saiyan, the series just plummets into this redundant story of trying to fight somebody, not having enough power, finding the power within you, defeating that enemy, and then rinse and repeat over and over again. It really drives Dragon Ball away from feeling impactful, as instead of wondering how our characters are going to overcome this great evil, you know Goku's just going to come in, find a transformation, and gain the power out of nowhere to defeat the villain. This point is driven even further as you get into Dragon Ball Super, as the technique and wit of the characters doesn't matter in the slightest. The only thing that matters is how powerful and loud Goku is. The idea of having an extremely powerful character, or even a character whose main drive and motivation is to gain power, isn't what ruins a story. It's instead when that drive and that need for power interferes where one could have a better narrative. Luckily, there are ways to prevent your character from falling too deeply into that too powerful for the story kind of trope, and there are even ways that you can incorporate your character's power into the story and still have a compelling plot. One of the most common ways that storytellers will incorporate their character's power into the story is to always have somebody who's above them. If there's a character who, no matter what your character does, no matter how hard they train, there is always somebody there who makes their effort seem worthless, then in the perspective of your story, it makes the character seem less strong than they actually are, and thus keeps you having a compelling story. Another way you can get around making your character too powerful is to give them the world and then suddenly take it all away from them. Think of this concept like climbing a ladder. Let's say your character's main goal is to create the best ice sculpture in the world, then the bulk of the story could be based around them making this ice sculpture, devoting all of their time and effort into putting every intricate detail into this ice sculpture. This part of the story would be akin to climbing a ladder. Now, to prevent your character from getting what they want or reaching the power that they're trying to get, you must now do something to take it all away from them. In our ice sculpture analogy, this would be if you wrote in that maybe the AC went out and now the room that our character is building their ice sculpture in is too hot to support their ice sculpture, and now it melts, setting them all the way back at square one. Coming back to our ladder analogy, this would be like our main character falling off the ladder. And now the rest of the story could consist of our character coming to terms with the fact that they've lost all of their progress and now trying to find a way to reach the point that they were trying to reach. Now, my final suggestion for trying to find a way to incorporate how strong your character is into the story would be to lean into the fact that yes, your character is indeed too powerful for their own good. And now the idea here is that you find a way that because your character is so strong, all the other characters in the story rely on them too much, possibly to their own detriment. Now, once you have the characters in a story in a spot where they rely on your character who's too powerful, there are plenty of ways to re-add the stakes into your story. You could find a way to incapacitate your character, get them out of the fight somehow, do something that makes it to where these characters who up until this point have not had to worry about what's going to happen because they know that your strong character will come in and save them. Now they have to find a way to get a fix. Now, obviously, these are just suggestions, probably not even great ones at that, but that's besides the point. The real point is that there are plenty of ways to find a way to incorporate a strong character or prevent your strong character from coming in and making the story seem inconsequential. All it takes is a little bit of time and effort, and even a plot based around power-ups and yelling like Dragon Ball can find a way to be compelling and interesting. Now, everything I said in this video today is, of course, opinion, so you are more than welcome to disagree with me. Even still, I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.